The department also celebrates its 50 years this year, as it was one of the founding departments in a university. We offer units in 3 different streams: in ethics, in mind, metaphysics and meaning, and in European philosophy. Last year and this year, 4 of our staff have received prestigious future fellowships.
I'm a philosopher of psychology. A lot of what that means is I look at things like psychology and cognitive neuroscience and try to figure out how people in those fields move from evidence to theory. A lot of what I've been interested in and what I'm going to be working on for the next few years involves thinking about what's called functional brain imaging. One of the things I'm interested in is this connection to what's sometimes called manipulation or manipulability. And the idea is, take the spot in your brain that lights up when you love. If you were to stop that from firing, you should be indifferent to the person you're looking at. So this kind of link between, on the one hand, activity, and on the other hand, the possibility of changing and manipulating things. In the same way that, if you've got a gene for blue eyes, one thing that means if it really is the gene for blue eyes is if you changed it, you could give someone brown eyes.
I work generally in the field of healthcare ethics, which means I start with practical problems in healthcare and look at the ethical issues that arise and try and develop solutions that are useful for practitioners and for policymakers. My most recent project, for which I've just been funded, is on the ethics of overdiagnosis, which is the problem that happens when people get diagnosed with conditions which aren't really diseases and which they don't really need to be treated for. So, for example, one source of overdiagnosis is when the boundaries of disease are widened. So, for example, diabetes is now defined at a lower blood sugar level than previously. And this raises issues about conflicts of interest, because clearly when you create a wider category, more people have got the disease, so there's more opportunities for treatment. And my project will look at how we can define disease in a way that stops overdiagnosis from happening, and also examine the ethical issues that arise and try and think about ways that we might be able to overcome them.
The Future Fellowship project that I'm working on is a project about how our brains get transformed by our surrounding social and cultural environments. So traditionally, a lot of people think that minds are simply dependent upon what our brains do. Philosophically, there's a big issue about whether or not our minds are entirely encapsulated within our skull. But the kind of view that I'm looking at is that perhaps there's a non-dualistic way of thinking about our minds, and that's by looking at the way that we actually interact with the world. So there is a big philosophical question about how we ought to conceive of the mind, whether we ought to think it's simply in the head, or whether we ought to spread our conception of the mind to include our bodies and also the way that we interact with our local environments.
Well, my main area of research is film and philosophy, so I'm looking at the intersection between film and philosophy, not just philosophical questions raised by the cinema about the moving image, what it is that's happening when we're watching a film on screen, but also the idea, a bit more radical, that film itself might be a way of doing philosophy. So my current project's called Cinematic Ethics, and it's looking at the positive potential of cinema to present an experience that we can describe as ethical. So how do moving images, audiovisual images, capture our attention, engage our imaginations, involve us emotionally in ways that might transform how we understand and see the world, and in particular how we respond ethically to the kind of situations that we can see and experience through the movies.
So it's very exciting times for the department at the moment, with all these great research projects. We're looking forward to another 50 years of success for philosophy at Macquarie.